ourselves need constantly to see the whole truth before our eyes all the time. And the whole truth is, of course, that the Son of God has given himself for us. And there is only one sacrifice on our part that is appropriate for that. And it seems important not to lose sight of that and to lose sight of the depth of that sacrifice. And I suppose I've felt often that you have read many of the same kinds of stories as we have, but perhaps there's a dearth in these days of the kinds of sacrifice that, of course, your parents and our parents knew in the first two world wars. We did not sacrifice at all. During the Second World War, we were just children, and it was nothing what we experienced. But that wasn't the story with other men. And I think that it helps us to see our lives and what we're sacrificing for Jesus, or what we're not sacrificing for Jesus, in the light of the sacrifices, tremendous sacrifices, that other people have made for just our freedom and for the victory of truth over untruth. And this is one of those obituaries. You probably can't see the man's picture, and it really isn't important. But this is one of those obituaries of really, they would be, in a sense, contemporaries of your parents. But he himself also would maybe be 5 or 10 years older than your parents. But this is how it runs. Brian Stonehouse, MBE, wartime SOE agent, died on December the 2nd, aged 80. He was born on August the 28th, 1918. A special operations executive radio operator in occupied France in 1942, Brian Stonehouse survived horrific periods of torture and imprisonment after being captured by the Germans in October of that year. From then until the end of the war, he endured unremitting brutality at the hands of the Vichy French, the Gestapo, the SS, and their henchmen in a series of penal institutions whose names are inscribed on the roll of infamy. These included the notorious Fraise prison in Paris, Mauthausen, Austria's very own, Himmler's words, concentration camp, Natzweiler, set up by the SS in that part of Alsace-Lorraine which had been incorporated in the Reich after June 1940, and finally Dachau in Bavaria, from where he was eventually liberated by American troops in the spring of '45. For Stonehouse and officer and other SOE prisoners who lived to return to normal life, only the determination never to give in. Never, love, I think you'd better do this stuff. Okay? You game? I think you come up here, love. I know you don't want to come up here, but I think you'll do better than I will. I think for Stonehouse, there. You can do it in your scientific voice.
For Stonehouse and other SOE prisoners who lived to return to normal life, only the determination never to give in, never to permit their captors to reduce them to the level of the vermin who were their constant companions, sustained them in their torment. And when, after these sufferings, normality did at last beckon, it was at first difficult for anyone in England to comprehend what these surviving prisoners of the SS had been through. When Stonehouse returned to London, an emaciated shadow of his former self, two of his former nursing friends hardly recognized him. And when in their horrified compassion, they invited him to the flat they shared and cooked him a lunch of chops, their entire week's meat ration, he rushed out into the street as the frying pan sizzled, crying, "I can't bear the smell of burning flesh." Brian Stonehouse grew up in France, received his education at the Boulogne Lycée. Later he studied art and was working as an illustrator for Vogue and other magazines when war broke out. He had first served with the Royal Artillery before taking a commission in the Honourable Artillery Company. His fluent French soon recommended him. In July 1942, using the codename Celestin, he was dropped into the Loire. It goes on then about his people he made contact with, all that sort of thing. But he was broadcasting, making a radio transmission because all the other transmitters had been killed or captured, and it went on a long time, and they were able to capture him. He was imprisoned first by the Vichy at Castres in the south of France, before being delivered into the hands of the Paris Gestapo at Fresnes. There, apart from admitting to being a British officer, he gave nothing else away, spent the next 12 months in solitary confinement. Each night, as he later recalled, he heard the sentry pause outside his cell and wondered whether this portended his execution. Next, in November 1943, he passed into the hands of the SS at Neubrem near Saarbrücken to experience the first dose of the SS. Thereafter there was something inexplicably random about the Nazis' treatment of their SOE prisoners. For no apparent reason, he was then sent to Mauthausen concentration camp, a grisly place whose proud boast was that it maintained the highest execution rate of any camp. At Mauthausen he met a number of SOE men he had known in London, and it names a number of them. Then they sent him to Natzweiler in Alsace, by then part of the Greater Reich. They were all now classified as being under the the night and fog decree, which put him in the ranks of those who could be dispatched without trace. Equally irrationally, Stonehouse and his colleagues were shoved about the concentration camp system for several more months before being sent in early 45 to Dachau. It was here he was liberated and reduced to the lowest level of degradation. He and his colleagues refused to succumb. After they were liberated by the Americans, Stonehouse was presented with a Thompson submachine gun and offered the chance summarily to execute the worst of the SS thugs with the promise of immunity from any inquiry. He refused. He said, "You must not sink to the level of your tormentors." He was awarded the MBE, which now seems a meagre enough acknowledgement. After his return to Britain, Stonehouse, like many of those who had endured such privations, did not much care to dwell on the past. He left Britain for America, settling in New York, where he revitalized his artistic career and established himself as a portrait painter. Came back and painted a portrait of Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother, and then later on another portrait of her which he was due to unveil, but he died, a brave, modest and kindly man.
But I thought we don't do so. I'm not tearful over the cause or the war or heroism or that sort of thing, but certainly over the readiness of a human being to face almost unendurable difficulties. And I think it's very important for us to waken up and see, as I present some of the ideas this evening for our schedule this coming year, I think it's very important for us to see we have it easy. It's nothing. And it's very important for us to look that square in the face whenever we have our little self-pity times, or whenever we think, oh, how hard this is. It's a party. Suppose I say that because, I mean, there's no reason why it couldn't be us, you know, why did it have to be him? But But we've never had our nails pulled out. We've never had our flesh burned. And this dear man has endured it all for us. Let us pray.